So first and foremost, let me thank Assistant Secretary Rebecca Watson of the Department of Interior and Undersecretary Mark Gray of the Department of Agriculture for joining us tonight. They saw the value of having this kind of dialogue with all of you this evening to be very, very important. Not only to hear from you, but for you to hear some of the initiatives that are well underway in this administration. I was told last night by my staff that I had spent way too long in bios, so I'm going to be much briefer tonight, but I did want you to better understand or better know Undersecretary Mark Gray. Mark, as you know, is the Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment, U.S. Department of Agriculture. He oversees USDA Forest Service and Natural Resource Conservation Service. I got to know Mark at the Energy and Natural Resources Committee when Mark was staffing me as the chairman of the Public Lands and Forestry Committee. And he and I, over a period of time, spent a lot of time, I should say, examining the U.S. Forest Service. Out of that effort grew a variety of pieces of legislation. I think one that most of you are more familiar with, called the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act of 2000. Here in Idaho, we call it Craig-Wyden. If you're in Oregon, it's called Wyden-Craig. But the bottom line was, it was our vision that if we could stimulate in a different way a collaborative process by which all stakeholders could come together, that there might be a greater opportunity to build some compromise. And out of that effort, over 2,100 projects have been implemented on the forest lands of our country in the last 4.5 years, and not one of them was taken to federal court. So I think the vision that Mark and I and others had as we crafted that piece of legislation worked. Then Mark is Undersecretary, and we're still on Capitol Hill, and out of that came the Healthy Forest Act that really was another major step, and some are suggesting one of the more significant steps, not only to recognize need in managing our public resources, but also doing it in a way that was proactive. Mark, Bachelor of Science and degree U.S. Wildlife, Bachelor of Science degree in Forestry, Master of Science degree in Natural Resources Policy, University of Michigan. Rebecca Watson, I've known for a good number of years, Assistant Secretary of Lands, Mineral Management, U.S. Department of Interior. She's a land lawyer, and I won't hold that against her because she's a Westerner. But Rebecca comes to the Bureau of the Department of Interior and oversees the Bureau of Land Management, Mineral Management Services, Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, has spent a good deal of her time there, is really moving that department ahead in a proactive way, dealing with community-based public land decisions that are affecting both the communities of our country and the resources around them. And of course, has dealt a great deal with the threat of communities and the urban interface with wildfires. Rebecca, an attorney practicing in Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and Washington, D.C., admitted to the state and federal courts, graduate, University of Denver. Right here in Idaho, Bret Macker. Did I pronounce that right? Over here. Thank you. Born and raised in Twin Falls, Idaho, a graduate with honors, College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls, worked as a draftsman for several years in Twin Falls and Pocatello. Then decided to further his education, graduated from the University of Idaho, cum laude in mechanical engineering, and is now here full-time as a process engineer at a semiconductor firm in Boise. But Bret would probably like you to know him better as an avid outdoorsman. Has been enjoying the backcountry of Idaho for over 40 years. Bret and his family started riding trail bikes in the late 60s. A member of the Magic Valley Trail Machine Association. Bret recently was voted in as president of the Idaho Trail Machine Association, which is the umbrella organization for 6 trail bike clubs across the state of Idaho. Conservationist Rick Johnson. We all know Rick is the executive director of the Idaho Conservation League, a membership-based organization working to preserve Idaho's clean water, wilderness, and quality of life through citizen action, public education, and professional advocacy. An Idaho media outlet placed him at number 49 of 100 influential Idahoans, and recent work at the Idaho Conservation League was described in depth in High Country News coverage November '04, where he was recognized for his outstanding leadership. So we appreciate, Rick, you being involved and here tonight. Scott Atkins, President, CEO of Bennett Forest Industries, and has been involved in management of the company's timberlands and lumber manufacturing operations since 1996. Scott was a member of diverse groups of Idaho County citizens which called themselves the stewards of the Nez Perce National Forest. This group was instrumental in providing input for the Meadow-Face Stewardship Project on the Nez Perce National Forest, has a Bachelor of Science degree, University of Idaho. A rancher who I've known for a good many years, and his dad lobbied me before when I was here in the State Senate. Mike Geary operates the family ranch in Castleford, Idaho, with approximately 7,000 ewes, 800 head of cattle, 640 acres of row crop. He's a graduate at Boise State University, where he earned his degree in accounting. He has served as an officer of the National Public Lands Council, headquartered in Washington, D.C., and is also a former president of the Idaho Wool Growers Association and director of the American Sheep Industry Association. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that makes up your panel for the evening. As many of you know, I have the great privilege of having been born and raised here in our state. Some would suggest that I, like many of you, came from pioneer stock. Our fathers and mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers before us had the opportunity to come here and settle. My grandmother came across Idaho at 4 months of age in a covered wagon. That doesn't seem like very long ago, when I turned 60 here the 20th of this month. But it was a long while ago. She and her family were Easterners, headed toward the Willamette Valley in Oregon. They didn't know what they were going to be. They just simply knew there was an opportunity because the land was available. Some became loggers, some became miners, some became cowboys. But they came west because of the land. And that was, of course, the history of what I have often called the Old West, because of the openness, but the availability of access to land and the opportunity, at least at that time, to own the land. That was the first in-migration of people. We in the West now are experiencing the second wave of immigrants. They can come from the East Coast, they can come from the West Coast, they're coming from everywhere to the Western United States and to here in Idaho. And they too are probably coming in part for similar reasons. Opportunity, whether it's the workplace or whether it's the great outdoors that we Westerners have learned to enjoy. They're coming. And they're coming in great numbers. And I would suggest that maybe we define them as the New West. They may be a computer scientist, they may be a business person of some kind, they may come to start a restaurant or to better a community. And if you ask them what they are, and they would tell you they're a scientist, they'd probably whisper to you, well, we really come because we like mountain biking, or we like hunting, or we like fishing, or we ski a great deal. But we love the outdoors, and one of the great amenities that brought us to Idaho and to the West was the public lands. You see, what both of those waves of immigrants coming to this great state had in common was the desire and the love of our public lands and access to those lands. Access to those lands for whatever purpose fit them at the time and the moment, that either was an amenity to their lifestyle or was in fact their lifestyle and the very occupation that they chose as a direct relationship to the public land resource. Out of all of those opportunities are the simple reality that Idaho is what it is, many western states are what they are, because of their public lands and public land base. And that land has never been without some level of dispute as to how it's accessed, how it's used, how it's protected, how it's maintained, how it's managed. And that's going on today, as it literally has gone on for decades of time. Why? I think because of all of our recognition of its value and its importance. That's why I thought it would be an opportunity for all of us if we could visit this evening about access. And so I would turn to Mark, or I would turn to Rebecca, and say that for the last several decades, it has literally been public policy that the way you protect a resource or sustain a resource in many instances is to deny access to it. And yet we found out that when that was happening, it was changing the very character of the communities associated with that resource, or changing the very character of the states in which that land existed. And that has been ultimately part of the conflict. Now, some of that's changing. Attitudes have changed, recognition of working together has changed, and I guess I would suggest in my question to Mark and to Rebecca this evening, what do you see now going on that will continue to facilitate a growing relationship, not only of access, but a collaborative working process between all of these stakeholders of interest, whether it be the Old West, the logger, the miner, the cowboy, or whether it's the New West? Is there a compatibility there? Is there a relationship there that ought to be developed? How do we bring those parties together in the clear understanding of access? Mark?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. Is this on? Well, I think one of the things that is fundamental in understanding how you design policies at this point is to appreciate that over the last quarter of a century, the West has changed significantly more than any other region of our country, perhaps as much as any other region of the world. You've described that change qualitatively in terms of the different kinds of people that have emigrated to the West. But in a quantitative sense, the 2000 census dramatically pointed out, first, that the West is the most rapidly growing region of the country, and second, it's the most urbanized region of the country now. In that census, the 5 fastest growing states during the decade of the 1990s were Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. And much of that growth has been coming not in the midst of large metropolitan areas, but rather on the urban or suburban or exurban fringe of the cities of the West, into what our fire scientists call the wildland urban interface. Our fire scientists indicate to us that over the last 2 decades, 8.2 million homes have been built in the wildland urban interface. We have an average household size of 4 persons per unit. What that means essentially is in the last 20 years, we've moved the equivalent of the current population of California into the wildland urban interface throughout the western United States, including, of course, California. So that's a description of the magnitude, the change that's occurred. And while it's tempting to talk about the Old West and the New West in the context of that change, I'm not sure that description of what's occurring is terribly helpful. And it may be one of our challenges here tonight is to try to find a new description, a way to contrast what the West was and what it is, rather than talking about it as the New or the Old West. Maybe the basic versus the diversified West would be more useful. I think distinguishing it between the Old and the New West is unhelpful first, because it suggests that there's a linear process where the new will replace the old, and that's not going to happen, because we're going to continue to have elements of both as we move forward from here. But second, and more importantly, ascribing one aspect of the West to be the Old West and another to be the New West, I think perpetuates some of the conflicts that have occurred and makes it harder to get beyond those conflicts to address the emerging issues that both the New and the Old West, that all of the current citizens of the West are going to have to work to resolve together. In my judgment, those issues are the rapid fragmentation and subdivision of privately owned lands in the Intermountain West, mostly ranch lands. In the last 2 decades, roughly 3.2 million acres of privately owned ranch lands have been converted to ranchettes or subdivisions. The second issue that we're going to have to address together is the fuel roads and the health of our forest and rangelands. A third is the rapid spread of invasive species. A fourth is the extraordinary increase in demand for recreation on our public lands, particularly more developed forms of recreation. And the fifth, of course, is going to be how we use limited water resources in the face of the changes that are occurring. But to successfully resolve these issues, the Old West and the New West will have to get past the old battles because they need each other to succeed in resolving some of the issues that I've just listed. For example, a healthy ranching industry is key to slowing down the rate of subdivision. Conversely, an unhealthy, an unstable ranching industry, a ranching industry that's pushed off of public lands, is going to increase the rate of subdivision of private lands. Forest products manufacturing infrastructure is essential to accelerating the rate of forest health treatments that we do, because that infrastructure can help us make use of that material and reduce the cost to all of us of getting it done. Active watershed management and farm and ranchland conservation measures are important tools to increase in-stream flows and to make more water available for the growth that's occurring throughout the region. Access created and maintained and/or maintained for development uses will be critical to providing infrastructure for recreation travel, reducing the amount of cross-country unmanaged recreation that occurs. And finally, the invasive species problem, by its magnitude and the variety of origins that produce it, is an all-hands enterprise that's going to require all of our best judgment to try to bring to a resolution. In the past, when the population of the West was smaller and the land seemed bigger, it was possible to develop a multiple-use policy that accommodated many interests and many uses by sort of segregating them out across the landscape so they didn't run into one another and antagonize one another. Now, with the growth of the population that's occurred and the increase in the variety of interests that we serve, I don't think that's any longer possible. The wide open spaces are neither as wide nor as open as they once were, given the number of people who'd like to be on them in some fashion. So we're going to have to look for ways to come to a better appreciation of our respective needs, to collaborate with one another to try to accommodate those needs, and by building the trust through doing that, try to address some of the problems that will define whether the diversified West 10 or 15 years from now is a success or a failure.
Mark, thank you. Rebecca, you're one of our larger landlords. Your response.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I'd like to share a little bit of my background before I start. I've always enjoyed hearing what Senator Craig had to say about his background. My family homesteaded in Indiana, and then we went to Chicago, and I came to the West when I saw the first set of mountains I'd ever seen in the 70s, and I transferred and went to the University of Denver. I'd never seen mountains and thought they were beautiful, and that's where I ended up. Began my career as a lawyer in a ranching community, Sheridan, Wyoming. And I've lived my life by choice in the West, in Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado, and I've always felt I was an observer of the West. I wasn't raised here, but I love the West. I love the values that I found here, and I particularly love the rural communities of the West. And I thought they had something that was part of the fabric and diversity of our America. It's something that many people around the world love and admire, the scenic beauty, but also the romance of our history, the cowboys, the Indians, and the wide open spaces that we have here. And if you look a little closer at our Western communities, that is something special that many Americans seek in their suburban existences, but our rural Western communities have, and that, I think, is something that is of value. That's what motivated me to leave my pretty wonderful life I had in Helena, Montana, to go to the Potomac and live in Washington, D.C. and take this job, was to see what I could do to try and help foster rural economic sustainability. I think I lived in a bit of a collision between the Old West and the New West. I was one of those folks that moved west for the amenities. I made my living representing the Old West. I represented miners, ranchers, oil and gas, and the timber industry. I represented recreational users, motorized and non-motorized, hunters and outfitters. All these folks living in these rural communities trying to make something work. I lived in Montana, which is a bit of the epicenter of the New West. And I saw the New West coming in, and I've seen the New West arrive in my old town of Sheridan, Wyoming. And Senator Craig posed the question, what is it we can do to marry these interests up? What is it that we share? And my perspective as the outsider who chose to live in the West is I think what I see people sharing is that love of the outdoors. It's the love that brought them there, whether they're a native or not. Each of them, they love their state. They made a choice either to stay there or to come there. And they share those values. And sometimes that gets lost in the divisiveness that we have in discussions over public lands. And that was the other thing that motivated me to come east, and that was, is there a better way to discuss these public land issues than the divisiveness? And of course, as a land lawyer, that's the way I made my living, was feeding off the divisiveness of public land disputes. But that is not the best way to manage public land. A judge, after all, is just a lawyer in a black robe. He's not a public land manager, or she isn't a public land manager. They're not trained to manage the public lands. And I wanted to come back and see if there wasn't a better way to do it. And what I've been pleased to do in my 3 years there is work on what the President and Secretary Gail Norton have called cooperative conservation. And that is our effort to try and find another way to talk about public land management. And what it means is to work together with the folks living out on the land, the people who love the land, live here, and seek their input, both informally and formally, and work together to resolve these issues. And today I saw an example right here in your community that was very impressive, and this is your Boise Foothills Open Space Initiative. I went to this wonderful education center that was just built, and I heard about the exchange process that Senator Craig is working on with some legislation. But this is a long-term initiative where folks in this community, and one of our speakers here tonight, helped foster an initiative to raise money to protect some open space up there in this neighborhood of Boise. But a lot of different people from a lot of different government and non-government agencies got together over a shared value. And then to keep it a long living thing, not just simply to put something away. They figured out how to use the land together. They have multiple use trails, motorized folks, pedestrians, non-motorized using the same trail. But then they have an education center, so the children of Boise and the adults can come there and get educated about living in this particular landscape. And to me, I think that is a way that we can move forward in these debates, is having a shared value about what we care about and educating ourselves about it and passing it on to our children and moving forward that way. So that would be my answer to your question.
Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca, great segue. Rick, I'll turn to you. Idaho Conservation League, you've been involved certainly in the Foothills Initiative, but a good many other initiatives over a long stretch of time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Idaho is blessed with over 9 million acres of unprotected, undeveloped public land, the so-called roadless country where the road ends and the trail begins. And I think a lot of the discussion over access and the future of many of the issues we're talking about isn't about the roaded landscape, where there are 34,000 miles of roads on our national forest, but this unroaded landscape. And ultimately, there is a lot of access for this country, but the question is not so much whether there's access, but whether providing access for all things in all places at all times is actually good for the land or for the outdoor experience that each of us seek when we go out there. I'd like to welcome Ms. Watson and Mr. Ray to Idaho. And while through the course of this evening, this gathering may focus a little bit on some of the conflicts that divide some of the Idahoans, I want to make sure that it's understood that, as has already been stated, but there's much here that we're tremendously proud of, and some of the nation's most remarkable landscapes under your jurisdictions have been protected here in Idaho, and there's much more that we feel deserves protection. And I hope you get the chance while you're here to see some of it. You mentioned the foothills, but to get out into the backcountry, the stuff that makes Idaho truly unique. And while Idahoans frequently disagree over the best use of our public land, there's absolutely no mistake. We all love it dearly. We have great pride in the quality of life that it provides us, and while we can spiritedly disagree, the passion for this place we call home, I believe, can be harnessed for greater good and certainly better public policy. My recommendation for how we address some of these issues and move forward to implement a multiple-use mission that incorporates some of these access issues, I think, is to forthrightly address an issue that has been unresolved for going on 20-plus years now, and that's what is going to be in the vast public domain that is undeveloped and unroaded, greater in this state than any other state in the lower 48. What are we going to designate and protect as wilderness, and what are we not? Until this work is done, I think our friends in the land management agencies are in a very, very tough position of trying to sort of put management band-aids over a vast public domain, and providing clarity that all the users need is very difficult. As has been mentioned, we're one of the fastest growing states. The city we're in right now is featured by Forbes magazine as best place to have a business. We're the fourth fastest growing state right now. Many of the values that we all seek from our public lands have been changing over time, and this changing value system, I think, is creating an interesting opportunity for us. I certainly agree with my friends in the motorized community that they need greater clarity of where they can ride, but also understand that it's not always in the same place that folks that would like the many thousands of Idahoans that are seeking a quiet recreation experience, they would also like to see. And sometimes it requires a separation of use, and that can be perceived as issues of access, but really it's the issue of protecting a quality experience. And I'm reminded, as think about the purpose of this forum and just an appreciation of being invited to this, I'm reminded something that Phil Batt once said to me, and he said, Rick, I was elected to represent everybody. And he looks at me and goes, even you. And it's sort of in that spirit, but with a touch of humor, but also, I'm a little bit of the odd man out here. And I would like to suggest that we are in a very unique opportunity to bridge some of the gulfs that have separated us. I hate to bring up the specter of politics, but we live in a political world, and today the party in the White House, the Senate, the House, our State House, our delegation is all one party. And candidly, that makes many of my colleagues sort of tremble in their Vibram-soled hiking boots. But as a student of politics, I also can see considerable opportunity in that. I think we really stand at sort of I'll call it a Nixon goes to China moment in public lands history for Idaho. You and the rest of the delegation have undisputable conservative credentials. And just as it took Nixon to reopen our relationship with China, something so-called liberals could never have done, you have the power and political position to both advance common sense conservation for Idaho and represent the folks you so clearly have spent a career speaking for. Because of this political moment, we could all do some new good for Idaho, all of Idaho. And ultimately, if today's legacy of this political moment is about opening up thousands of acres to development without the complementary conservation measures, I think that the opportunity will be missed, and Idaho's people and Idaho's land and wildlife will be the poorer for it. There certainly is a new West, but the new West is still driven by the same conservative values that underlie the Old West. And when honestly defined, these conservative values have always included conservation and stewardship. Conservation can complement Idaho's conservative values, but we need the leadership from all of us that provides unity rather than polarization. I first met you, Senator, over 20 years ago, testifying before a House subcommittee, and here we are talking about the same things. But as we sit here tonight, Idaho is not the same place it was then, in the early 80s, and I'd even venture to say that neither are we. Success for Idaho is not going to come when what I represent, and I know you believe this, but success for Idaho is not going to come when what I represent is pushed aside because of the position that is held today, the political position. Similarly, success for Idaho will not come when the politics change and my interests try once again to roll the other side. That's just repeating the past and expecting different results, and as I was reminded today, that's by some the definition of insanity. Our job is to resolve these tough issues by making decisions where everybody has to give. And with support of county commissioners and many others, we're trying to do this in the Boulder White Clouds and in the Oahe Canyon lands. These are just two places, but given our collective record over the past 25 years, they are a start. And for all of Idaho, I hope they will gain your support, ultimately. Terry Tempest Williams writes that the eyes of the future are looking back on us. So my recommendation is that we work to ensure that future generations are proud of what we've done, rather than just bear witness to the fights we fought, as important and as highly charged as they often are. Thanks.
Rick, thank you. You've offered some excellent challenges, and one of the bigger ones that administrations, not just individual legislators, but administrations have challenged themselves with is the rare two, or in other words, how do we define, how do we designate these unroaded acres? This administration is trying a new approach. Maybe we could discuss that for a moment, and the offer that has been handed down to the governors as it relates to that process. Would you wish to discuss that? We've got both sides of me here have got large chunks of that acreage so defined.
Well, as I think most people have read in the papers last month, we did finalize a new rulemaking to try to resolve the disposition of the remaining roadless areas of the National Forest System. The rulemaking is a procedural rulemaking whereby we invited governors to work with us to develop rules for their specific states that define which roadless areas should remain roadless and which shouldn't. Governors have 18 months to respond to this invitation. Many have already done so verbally and are preparing to do so in writing. And in many cases will, I believe, embark on these state-specific rules through a subsequent public participation process that will result at the end of that process in a rulemaking specific to the state of Idaho or the state of Colorado or whichever state the governors express an interest. In the interim, during that 18-month period, while governors are considering whether they want to engage with us in this endeavor, we will endeavor to hold the status quo in place, and decisions about roadless area entries will be reserved to the Chief of the Forest Service. We won't be making them at a lower level of the agency. If 18 months passes and the governor elects not to participate, then it's our intention to allow the resolution of this issue to revert back to the regular land and resource management planning process that has developed as a consequence of the 1976 National Forest Management Act. There may be some governors that elect to allow the issue to revert back to the land and resource management planning process, either because they choose not to engage in the development of a state-specific rulemaking with us, or in some cases and in some states, because the issue was largely resolved during the land and resource management planning process, so there's no additional value or additional level of resolution that will be added by the development of a separate rule dealing with roadless areas. So that's what we've proposed. I've talked personally with a number of governors and relatively enthusiastic about the response that we're getting and optimistic that we will embark on some of the discussions that Rick indicated would be worthwhile to undertake.
From our perspective, of course, there was a lot of attention paid to the wilderness settlement that Secretary Norton entered into, but our position has been that the wilderness study areas that were presented to the President to Congress back in about 1993, which involved many hundreds of thousands of acres, are still pending up in Congress. And we believe it's very important to the states that have these wilderness study areas in them on Bureau of Land Management land, which are managed as designated wilderness. They're managed to preserve the wilderness characteristics, even though they're not designated wilderness. We think that some certainty should be brought to wilderness study areas. So as an agency and its administration, we have testified in support of legislation that has brought certainty to states where they have entered into bipartisan discussions with groups and organizations to resolve these issues. I've testified in support of the Lincoln County bill in Nevada, where Senator Reed and Ensign and Representative Gibbons resolved longstanding issues for Lincoln County. This is a county which is 99% in federal ownership. And you can imagine the struggle that that county faces with 99% of its land in federal ownership. They came up with a package that they work with wilderness advocates as well as ranchers, recreationists, many different interests, and came up with a bill. The administration and the Bureau of Land Management worked with them to resolve different issues, and we testified in support of it. Similarly, we did so with a similar bill in New Mexico that Native Americans and ranchers and wilderness organizations and bipartisan delegations supported. So we support bringing resolution and closure to the long-pending wilderness study area issue on Bureau of Land Management land. So,
thank you. Scott, when I became a state senator in 1974, the forest products industry was vying in agriculture for the #1 or #2 slot. By 1980, it was at about that rate. Forest products industry and gross sales in Idaho and employment in large part was considered the #1 industry. That is no longer the case today by substantial numbers for a variety of reasons that have been discussed, disputed, and otherwise dealt with over the years. Your take?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the forest products industry is an incredible volatile industry. We produce primarily commodity products. And as you mentioned, we were part of the pioneers of the West. And people came here for the opportunities that the forest products industry presented. And, you know, that time has changed a little bit. We still, I believe, are an important part of Idaho's economy and land managers' ability to manage a landscape, because we provide a product, or we provide a market for some of the products that come off of the land. You know, we've been talking a lot tonight here about access to our lands and the wonderful state we lived in, and you know, I truly believe we are blessed. I drove down today from Grangeville, and I was driving down into Boise. It was a beautiful drive. It was a beautiful sunny day, coming through the green meadows of New Meadows and into McCall, and it's just breathtaking, really. And I was thinking on the way, like, okay, what am I going to say here tonight? And I did prepare some stuff, but that usually doesn't work out so well for me. And it's usually better if I can speak from my heart. And really, I'm pretty deeply involved in a lot of land management issues because they impact me daily. And one of my big concerns is you know, we're blessed, we have a great landscape here. But there's some real issues today, and you know, part of the reason why we have these amenities you talk about is because the people before us did a good job of managing the landscape. And they provided nice trail systems, they took care of them. You know, we have roaded areas, and some of them are roaded a little bit too much. We need to do some things about that. But that's why people are coming here, is because somebody did something right. We have a pretty nice place, and feel like we got to maintain that legacy and continue to do a good job. And you know, I meet with primarily the Forest Service land managers, and they truly have some challenges right now with budgets. Budgets are tight, getting projects done. One of the biggest issues we face, and you touch on this a little bit, is litigation. And you know, judges, I think you mentioned they're not trained to be land managers, but today they're empowered to do that. And I'm not sure how to fix that. We have a system that a lot of times when there is conflict and disagreement, the easy solution, or maybe the last solution, maybe the first solution sometimes, is to litigate, because people have figured that out. And this thought actually just popped in my head, but I feel like our federal land managers are a little bit like Gulliver, and they're pinned down by all these little lawsuits, and it's tough to get out. And so there's really some issues out there. Mark mentioned invasive species and fuel loading, and I hope we can continue to provide this great access to our landscape and keep people coming here in Idaho. It's going to keep my business, even though it's a smaller part of the state, it's going to keep us healthy. And just encourage our land managers to maybe use technology a little better, and in visual aids when they talk about projects. I don't know if this would help, but they get tied down to litigation, but it's a complex situation. I read environmental impact statements, and they're pretty dull. They're pretty difficult to go through. And one thing that is not there is, okay, here's a landscape. What's it going to look like if this planned action goes through? And with the technology of computer models that we can employ, and we do it in our business when we look at a landscape and how we're going to treat it. I mean, we're tree farmers and sawmillers. And we have software that we can look at a landscape and go, okay, we're going to remove certain parts of this stand and know what it'll look like right after we get done in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years. And I think if people could see that, it might be a little easier for them to get comfortable with some of the projects that happen. So I believe there is some technology that could be helpful.
Last night, Rebecca, you gave a great example of environmental impact statements and resource utilization. One of the great conflicts we're in today in Washington are budgets. The Interior Department is underfunded. The Department of Agriculture is underfunded. We have substantial deficits. Revenue streams change. Obviously, with the decline of public land logging over the last decade and a half, we've seen dramatic declines in the revenue flow coming through the Forest Service to the Treasury, and therefore the funding of the Forest Service. A great deal of that cost now has gone into the processes of preparing environmental impact statements, or EAs. You might visit with us a little bit about that. Your explanations last night in Idaho Falls, I thought, were very illustrative.
Well, when the National Environmental Policy Act was passed, if you ever look at it, it's a very short act, and the idea was to disclose, have everybody understand what would be the impact from a particular federal action, so we could understand what the impact would be, and then modify it to reduce the environmental or the socio-economic impact of a federal action. Initially, environmental assessments, which would tell you whether or not you needed to do a much longer environmental impact statement, were supposed to be 15 or 20 pages. An environmental impact statement was supposed to be no longer than 150 pages. Well, if you know anything about the documents nowadays, EAs, environmental assessments, are 100, 200, 300 pages, and environmental impact statements are now multi-volume treatises that are so long they're frequently put on compact discs and mailed to citizens that want to see them. And I think your point is well taken. These are supposed to be public participation opportunities. My point is nobody participates in reading NEPA documents because they are boring, but they're long. Nobody wants to read these things except lawyers who are paid to do it, or advocates who are preparing to sue the government on these documents. And so the opportunity for public participation is really lost. One of the things that we tried to do in the Healthy Forest Initiative is get back to the original intent of NEPA. And we had a model EA. We said, could we describe one of these healthy forest projects going in to treat forests to prevent catastrophic fire in 15 to 20 pages and do a good job? And we did that. We had 15 pilot projects. The Council on Environmental Quality, the experts for NEPA, took a look at those documents and said, yes, it could be done. You could do a good job. Well, I submit that 20 pages is something that most everybody could probably read, take a good look at, and provide meaningful comment. And I think that gets us back to what NEPA was originally intended to do. So that's just an example, and most EAs and EISs cost at least $1 million, so that gets to the budget point.
Agriculture has always been the largest economy of our state, and historically so and true today, the largest segment of that economy is the livestock grazing industry. Sheep and or cattle, mostly cattle today versus sheep. Mike Gary, you grew up in that industry. What's your take on public land access and the relationships you have today with land managers and the resource?
Well, thank you, Senator, and I'd like to thank both of the undersecretaries for being here tonight also. I've been a believer for a long time that access is extremely important to where we're headed in the public land industry. Those of us that are public land ranchers, the reason that access to me is going to be so important is that we're not only public land ranchers in the state of Idaho, but we're normally private land ranchers also. It's checkerboarded type property out there that we're running on, and most people come out, and if they see sagebrush or trees, they assume it's public land. And oftentimes that's not true. We haven't tried to control access, we haven't tried to restrict access to any of our private lands through the years, but many of our neighbors have, due to various reasons, whether they be economic or because of the impacts they've had from other people out there. And so I guess the reason I've thought access is going to be so important is the fact that I think it's the one thing people like myself and Scott have that everybody else wants. It's access because of our private lands that are tying up some of these public lands, or access just to our private lands. And I think it's going to be an opportunity to bring people to the table that maybe otherwise wouldn't have come, because they do want that access. I understand that. I want that access every day too. I spend every day out there and I enjoy every day out there. I struggle with some of the things that happen out there because of access. I spent most of the last week cutting Scotch thistle from one end of the mountain to the other along the roads that's invading that area, mostly due to vehicle traffic, bringing it in. Issues like that are tremendously difficult to get out ahead of. I appreciate the comments that were made about NEPA and the planning process and the litigiousness of these public land issues. We're struggling terribly in that industry, in our industry, to be able to get things done, not so much on our part, but on the range management part. The BLM and Forest Service struggle on a daily basis. They can't get out of the office. They spend all their time on paperwork. We've got a lawsuit pending in our area right now that's taken at least 4 or 5 staff people out of the Jarbidge resource area a good month. And they stayed there until way into the night, working every night, trying to get the paperwork and everything ready for that. This is time that could have been spent out on the ground, working with ranchers, working on getting monitoring done, working on a lot of things that we know need to be done, and a lot of things that we get talked down for because we aren't getting the monitoring done, and a lot of those things that we wish we were getting done, because we need to prove our side of the story too. We've worked very hard. I know my family starts back with my granddad, who came as an immigrant sheep herder from the Basque Country. My dad's first generation born in this country, and in 2009, one of the 3 of us will have been in the sheep industry for 100 years. So we've got a lot of tradition out there, and we've got a lot of pride in what we're doing out there, but we're frustrated too. And I would hope that if we can, through access, bring these groups together and get everybody to work together, that maybe we can work on some of these issues, and maybe we can work on the planning process, and maybe make our comments at the appropriate times and make our efforts at those times, so that we don't tie the hands of the range managers, so that when it comes time to be out on the ground and actually working, we're doing that kind of thing. And we can be working on the kind of monitoring and that kind of thing that looks at trend and making things better, not the kind of monitoring that we're doing right now, which is just measuring stubble height. I'm afraid that if we continue on that route, pretty quick, my background will qualify me to be a forest ranger, since I'm an accountant by trade. And those are the kind of things that concern me, that that's the vision that we've got right now, and I worry about how we're going to be able to move forward unless we can get back to looking at trends and the kind of things that we need to do by creating time on the ground. And I think the way we do that, like I said, is to get together, and I think the thing that may bring us together is this access issue. Because I'm afraid too, I don't want to see all of this private land developed. I do think, however, we've been told for years that we're just crying wolf when we talk about if you take away the economic value of our livestock and permits, that the only thing we have left to develop is our private ground. Well, I think you can see that that's not crying wolf with some of the statements that have been made about the 3.2 million acres that have been developed. There's a lot of things, closing access to hunting for fee hunting, wind power projects. There's many different ways that these private lands can be developed, and they will, because that's the only opportunity to be left. So we need to get together. If access is the issue, as I believe it is, then we need to get together based on access.
About 3 years ago, a group over in the Soda Springs area approached me because a ranch had decided to subdivide itself. It had had its grazing permits cut by over 60%, and it was no longer a viable unit. The subdivision was going in, the survey markers had been established, the fences were going in, and they were going to fence a major canyon, a canyon that was a major migration flow for mule deer. And mule deer would begin stacking up on those fences as they already were, instead of being able to flow across the open rangeland that was deeded land. It's part of what Mark talked about earlier. We intervened along with a variety of interest groups and were able to acquire a piece of that land to protect that flow pattern for the migration of those mule deer. That was all well and good, but the problem was it was no longer fee land. It was public land. It no longer paid taxes. The county was poorer for it, and the ranch no longer existed. That's part of the complexion of the change that we're into if we don't resolve some of these access issues and recognize the balance. The other thing that Idaho is well known for is its licensed off-road recreational vehicle list. I suspect one of the largest per capita licensings in the nation. Bret, we're going to ask you to visit about those issues and access as you see it through the motorized use of our public lands.
Senator Craig, thank you very much. Undersecretary Ray, Assistant Secretary Watson, thank you for coming and listening to what we have to say and what we'd like to see with our public lands. First off, I want to dispute the myth that the OHV people are not interested in protection. We are definitely interested in protection. Having sustainable places for our recreation is very important to us. We love what we do. We love the state of Idaho. And I think at times in the past, with such a large state, with such a large number of open areas, trailed areas, that a few people did have a tendency to think that it was an infinite resource, that we could ride wherever, do whatever. Those times are changing, and we realize that. We understand that we need to do away with the cross-country travel. We support a managed, designated trail system. We feel it needs to be broad. We feel it needs to be diverse. But we're definitely interested in that. Undersecretary Ray has a graph there that shows a little bit of the OHV use increase in the last 10 years. And I'm not sure when he was going to show that. I don't want to steal his thunder, but this graph, I think, is pretty indicative of all recreation in Idaho. This happens to be, since we have a registration program for off-highway motorcycles and ATVs, this just happens to show what's happened. I'm not sure what the first date is. 1973. 1973, so 30 years of recreation, what has happened with off-highway motorcycles and ATVs. This is happening in all recreation. People are coming to Idaho to refresh themselves, to recharge their batteries. Restrictive land management designations. Restrictive land use classifications work directly in opposite to this. We don't need to be closing land to protect it. We need to protect it via management, but let people come to Idaho to support our economy and to support the things that we need. As Scott and Mike had said, they're in industries that are slowly shrinking. Recreationists don't suffer from that. We're expanding, at an alarming rate. And that's part of the struggle that I think land managers have. And when I say we're interested in protection, I think we need a designation that speaks to protection and access. The Blue Ribbon Coalition has brought forth the idea of backcountry recreation, where it provides the land managers a framework for protection while allowing access. Like I say, a firm restrictive designation works against what's happening. In other instances, we have tried to segregate users, many times to the detriment of the off-highway vehicle user or the motorized or mechanized recreationist. We feel that, at times this is appropriate. Off-highway vehicles shouldn't go everywhere. People in general probably shouldn't go everywhere. However, this should be a shared restriction. If there are conflicts or instances of overuse or just overcapacity on a trail system, these restrictions should be shared among all users, not with always the off-highway vehicle being the person or the groups excluded. The financial drain and litigation gridlock that we see. One of the things that we've attempted lately is to work together with land managers, with the grazers, forest products people, sit down at the same table, have discussions. One of the things we talked about, the innovation and technology with forest management and grazing. Obviously the technology of mechanized recreation or any recreation on trails, waterways, roads, whatever it may be, is increasing at an enormous rate. The technology associated with the management of that is not growing at the same rate. We need innovation. We need to try some new things. The tools that are there, I think, have land managers' hands tied. Their choice is close it or, put up with what's happening. We need some other innovation that may happen. And I think some of these other industries have been through that period of innovation and growth. The recreation community is kind of on the upward slide of that. One of the things, especially with our Bureau of Land Management lands, to this point in Idaho, they've been vast, open areas for recreation. No maps for trail use. We have trailheads designated. Where a person shows up there with their off-highway vehicle, mountain bike, a hike, whatever it may be, they're left to define their own path to this destination, whether it's a mountain distance or whatever it may be. We need to get maps in people's hands right away. And the current process of inventory, review, and then designate is stifling that. Yes, we need to review before we designate, but what I'd like to see is the maps in the hands immediately. Let's take the inventory of trails, put the maps down, review them, and decide which trails need to stay on that map. I think that's a step in the right direction. Overall, I think the era of these issues being just stuck in gridlock are closing. Like I said, I see a lot more cooperation. I see a lot more willingness to get together. The injunctions and lawsuits, they're only seeking to delay important decisions that have the potential to reduce impact. The idea of collaboration is well set, but we must refine it to make sure that groups are represented equally. The recreation group are just that. They're recreation people. They're very unorganized on the most part. At this point in the land access and the political side of it, we're coming up to speed slowly, but a lot of times we're very underrepresented in the decisions that are made. We must find a middle ground. I think this is where we'll come up with some unique solutions to help with the growing amount of recreation. They'll protect our trails, roads, waterways. One point we discussed a little bit about the roadless areas. And I'd just like to point out that these areas may be roadless, but they are not trailless. And they're very heavily used areas that's the place where we recreate and play. And I want to commend Governor Kim Thorne on his decision to let those be managed by the Forest Service and use that plan and push the decisions down to the local level to change any of those plans or to bring up suggestions for further protection or access uses. Thank you.
Well, let me thank our panelists, and let me ask Rebecca if you would like to make any closing comment to our panelists.
I think the last panelist brought up one of the biggest challenges. The Bureau of Land Management as you pointed out, is the largest land manager. We manage 262 million acres of land, of surface land, and 700 million acres of minerals. We have about 10,000 employees to manage all of that land. And our budget is a little less than $1 billion to manage all that land. And I think it works out to a little less than $2 an acre to manage that land. And when you talk about dealing with recreation, this is an activity that has grown on BLM lands very quickly. The Bureau of Land Management lands, as I learned recently at a Lewis and Clark event I attended, are really the last chapter of the Lewis and Clark story. This is President Jefferson's vision of putting the land in the yeoman farmer. After he sent Lewis and Clark out to survey this land and look at it, he sent surveyors out, and then it was to be opened up to the folks to farm it. Well, then there was a lot of land left over, and that's what BLM often was called, the Bureau of the Leftover Land. Well, then there was a change in philosophy, and we decided to keep this land. And we had a lot of commodities production on it, and still do. But now the growing use, and I say that the challenge for the Bureau of Land Management in the 21st century is recreation management. This is what the public is demanding for the Bureau of Land Management lands. We have 22 million people living within 25 miles of our public lands. Bureau of Land Management lands are their backyards, they're their playgrounds, they're their open space, and we are facing recreational demands that are a challenge for our managers to handle this demand. And we've heard many different challenges that we face tonight, and we are struggling to keep up with those challenges. But I come back to what I said at the beginning. We cannot do it alone. We understand that we can't do it alone, and we reach out in partnership with the local communities where we live. That, I think, is something that I am proud the Bureau of Land Management does. I've traveled in these 3 years, and I've met with many local people in these public land states, and we have strong partnerships in local communities working together to try and solve these problems, working together, volunteering and managing these lands. And I look to that with some degree of optimism. We still need money, we still need managers. That's not discounting that, but we also need the help of the American people, and there's a lot of good folks out there that are joining together with us.
Thank you. Mark, closing comments to these panels.
I think one of the things that Scott said is something that is worth repeating and keeping in mind, and that is that the stewards of the Old West did a sufficiently good job at managing these lands that they are attractive enough to present us with a new West and with the issues that we'll now have to confront together. And we often lose sight of the fact that it is, as a result, case of the Forest Service of 100 years of stewardship, that we have national forests to argue about today. I think it's worthwhile to look at a more historic context of not how bad things are, but how well we've actually done.
Please raise your hand and we'll move ahead.
Hello, my name is Erin Anchusty, and I teach environmental ethics here at Boise State University. And my question for you today has to do with the voluntary buyout of federal grazing permits. Okay, so here's my question. It seems to me that voluntary buyouts of federal grazing permits, it's an excellent voluntary solution to public land resource conflict. Do you support this, and if not, why? If you don't support this, then isn't your position tantamount to embracing, pardon the analogy, a command and control system of socialist system of administration on public land? That is my question. I thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll obviously let these two folks speak for themselves. I have generally opposed buyouts of grazing permits. It doesn't mean I have opposed reduction in grazing, but I do see grazing as a part of a balanced basket of tools by which to manage our public lands. I also see grazing tied directly to our small communities and their well-being. We've spoken about the open spaces of our West rapidly closing in because these ranches were no longer viable and they become subdivided so that somebody can build their mega home on them, uplink to their satellite, and come to the West. That's okay for some, but then I will have to reference to you that ranch that I had to help buy a piece of with a lot of public money and other people's use to make sure that it wasn't subdivided in that mule deer migration pattern. I think we have to look at all of this in its context. I believe grazing, properly handled, is a very valuable management tool. Mark, Rebecca, wish to respond?
We have testified before Senator Craig's subcommittee that we oppose the use of federally appropriated dollars to retire public lands grazing leases, or in our case, Forest Service grazing leases. We would not stand in the way of any private sector transaction wherein a non-governmental entity raises the money to purchase a grazing lease from a current operator. But we will oppose the expenditure of federal appropriated dollars for that purpose. And the reason is that what we too often, almost always, in fact, see happen is that once that lease is retired, then the fee base of that ranch is subdivided with all the problems that Senator Craig and I have already described. And so what is occurring, therefore, is the expenditure of federal funds to create greater environmental harm, not greater environmental good, because frankly the more valuable lands ecologically are the fee lands because they're riparian lands, and having them converted into subdivisions is a greater ecological harm. So that's been the position that we've articulated.
Rebecca?
I would only add to Mark's statement that this presents a very difficult issue because on one hand you have sympathy for the rancher who has lost the ability to run a viable operation. We've heard several examples of it tonight as the senator mentioned, a place that had lost a number of AUMs so it was no longer viable. So you say, well, on one hand, certainly this rancher should be able to get something out of this and be able to sell his grazing rights. But as someone once said, no man is an island. On the flip side, what happens to that community that that rancher lives in? When that voluntary buyout happens, whether it be with private money or federal money, there are ramifications to the community in which that person lives, and we've seen that play out. We have supported a voluntary buyout at Interior with private dollars, and the impacts on the small town in which the ranchers lived were tremendous. The loss of the tax base, the loss of the ranchers coming in and buying their equipment had a terrific impact on the community. So there is another side to that story, and so it's a tough question because you have two values there that are being weighed. So I would just add that perspective.
Further questions? Over here. Why don't I pick up a couple more staff people who are in the room? There's mics here, and we can move them around the room much quicker. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Barbara Lamb. I'm a fourth generation Idahoan. Lived in logging communities, worked for the Forest Service, lived in mining communities, and I am very firmly for maintaining the roadless areas. What I've been hearing so far about budgets and land use and everything, as I have a lot of sympathy for each of the industries that are impacted. Obviously, they're very personal to me, but they've also got priors in land stewardship. You know, as far as all the technology available to do proper stewardship, I do believe it's there. I don't believe it's being utilized. I think that the land shows abuse. And that all the arguments that are all the points I've heard so far
none of them point to any advantage that I can see to opening up roadless areas. If the budgets are stretched so thin that we can't maintain what we've already got out there, I don't see how opening roadless areas is going to do anything but make the problem bigger. That's my main point.
Well, thank you very much. Obviously, the roadless issue is a big issue. The state of Idaho and those of us who have the responsibility for policy shaping have tried to resolve this issue over a 20-year period to no success, in large part because of a broad, diverse concern about the ultimate designation of those lands. Bush 1 tried it, obviously Clinton has tried it. Now, once again, it is being tried by returning some of that proposed decision-making, not decision-making, but proposal for recommendation to the state level before it comes back to the federal. And we'll try it again to see if we can do so. But I think there is a very large concern about, obviously, the protection of that land base. Further questions? Yes.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Peter Hum. I'm from Mountain Home. I worked 28 years for the Bureau of Land Management as a realty specialist. A couple of issues that I am concerned with. One is I see Congress abdicating its responsibility under Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution, which is called the Property Clause, to manage the public lands. And the Supreme Court has held that, I'm quoting from Cluppy versus New Mexico, a 1976 decision, that said the power of Congress over the public lands granted by the Property Clause is without limitation. And what I'm seeing in a number of instances, 1866 mining law, specifically roads granted to the public under revised statute 2477, are being closed as part of the so-called inventories and so-called management, simply by pretending they're not there. I'd like to see some inventory on the part of both departments determining where these roads are, because they were granted to the public and they cannot be terminated by an agency. Secondly, the roadless areas and areas that are designated for no off-road vehicle use at all are a de facto mining withdrawal. You are closing them to anyone who needs to go out and prospect for mining claims, and that's a power granted to Congress. If Congress wants to close areas to mining, let Congress do it. It's being done, I think, on an administrative basis now, and I have problems with that. Generally speaking, I like the process of having, collaboration with all the users, but I do think that Congress has been abdicating a lot of its responsibility and giving it up to the courts, basically. You're saying, well, we can't do anything, we have NEPA, and that's causing problems. Well, Congress passed NEPA. Congress can amend NEPA.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, the roads issue.
I would speak to the issue of the 2466, I think.
2477.
2477. I don't know why I thought it was 2466. But anyway, at the Department of Interior, we entered into a settlement with the governor of Utah to try and bring a resolution to this issue. And it hasn't worked out in the way we envisioned it would. We wanted to move forward with the settlement with Utah first as a model and then take it to other states. And the state of Utah had a number of roads that they felt met our criteria of the policy that we had. And these were roads that had been in existence. They were roads that nobody would have any dispute over, that we would then simply disclaim interest in as the United States. We wanted to come up with a policy that would bring resolution in a simplified manner, because there's always, under the Federal Land Policy Management Act, the ability to bring a Title V lawsuit to do that, but we came up with this process. Today I learned the state of Utah, the Attorney General, has just filed a lawsuit against the Department of Interior on 5 lawsuits, decidedly rejecting the approach that the Secretary of Interior had proffered. We stand ready to work with other states on roads that meet the criteria that we have laid out in the policy that we have in the state of Utah. We'd like to bring resolution because we know that this is an important issue. And as to the mining law of 1872, when we first came into office, the Secretary of Interior, Gail Norton, addressed that issue and I think reaffirmed our belief in the self-initiating law of the mining law. We think this is important. We think mining is an important foundation to this nation's economy, and we think the mining law of 1872 is an important part of that. The Secretary also at that time laid out 5 principles that she challenged Congress on mining law reform. No one has to date picked up the gauntlet, so to speak, of mining law reform. But we have taken several steps in the 3 years that we've been there to, I think, strengthen mining law in the 21st century, address some of the environmental issues, but also buttress the foundation of mining law. So I've just addressed those 2 issues that you raised.
With respect to the Forest Service holdings, RS 2477 rights-of-way are a substantially smaller issue. We have many fewer of those than the Bureau of Land Management because of the different nature of our land holdings. We have, however, made it clear to states that when they want to execute an RS 2477 right away, we would work with them. But it is something that, under the statute, the states have to initiate. I suppose we could go and more aggressively solicit those proposals from the states, but in all honesty, trouble usually finds me, so I don't need to go looking for it. The offer is open and it's sincere. There are a couple of instances where we're working on RS 2477 rights away, and I suspect we'll be able to work that through to a mutually acceptable conclusion with the states involved. As it relates to the roadless rule and mining access, both the 2001 roadless rule, which the courts have struck down and which we've replaced, and our roadless rule provide an exception for access to valid existing rights. We are legally obliged to do that under the statutes, and we will continue to do that. So I don't think that these rules can be fairly called or described as an administrative withdrawal from mining access.
Questions?
Excuse me, thank you, Senator Craig, Ms. Watson, and Secretary Ray. I'm really glad somebody finally brought up mining. I thought maybe we were going to be
You
stepchildren.
need to introduce yourself to this
My name
audience.
is Pat Holmberg, and I represent the Independent Miners Association, which is in mom and pop areas. My question tonight, at this moment, we're not having any big problem with access. But we're just starting to get back out on the land because the value of minerals has gone up. Over the years, I've had many good friends, both BLM and the Forest Service. What I see today is different than I saw 15 years ago. Today, we look more at why you can't do something instead of why you can. The state of Idaho, and I'll just give you an example, I'll be brief. The state of Idaho 3 years ago, with the Department of Lands, Bureau of Minerals, and with myself and Lois Van Hoover, we wrote a state law because small miners were having to put up thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in bonding, which took their operating capital, so it just pretty much put them out of business. Now in the state of Idaho, we took a bill through the state legislature which had no dissenting vote. We created a trust account, and we created a way that small miners, under a certain limitation on acreage, not using any chemicals, could give the state or have the state underwrite a performance bond. I am now still waiting, still working, because even though the 228.8 regulations and the 3809s say if there is a parallel law within the state, that the land management agencies will honor that. There is a parallel law. The statement that I'm getting is from the Forest Service, not particularly the BLM. But the statement that we're getting is that they don't want to accept the state's performance bond because if the legislature created it, the legislature could take it away and that money might not be there. But by the same token, sir, if I'm going to have to put up $9,000 for a bond, could not Congress change the land management agencies? So therefore, do I want a $9,000 bond with them, or do I want the state?
And your question is, ma'am?
My question is that I'd really like to know why we have to follow the rules, and we have to follow the regulations as they are written, and why the BLM and the Forest Service does not.
Mark?
It was sometime last October when our Office of General Counsel advised me that I had broken the indoor world record as a named defendant in environmental litigation. So the proposition that we don't follow the rules is not borne out by the number of watchdogs that we have to assure that we follow the rules. As I understand it, we are currently working on permitting some mines using the state of Idaho bonding process, and we'll probably be sued if we do permit those mines from somebody who doesn't want them permitted. So I'll check into that, but it seems to me that that's something that if the state's provided a mechanism for us to work with, that we ought to do so.
Any comment, Rebecca? She really is the miner of the group.
Yeah, I would likewise look into it, and I don't know why we wouldn't be doing that. I know we have done so with other states where they have a bonding pool, which is, it sounds like what you're describing here. So I'll check with the BLM and see what our status is.
Question over in this side.
Thank you, Senator Craig, and the distinguished panelists. My name is Roberta Crockett, and I live here in Boise. And I am a fourth or fifth generation Idaho. My family was in Idaho before there was statehood. And I grew up hiking and fishing and hunting, and I think that has formed part of who I am as a person. And I think that was a good thing. One of the things that was crucial to my ability to experience those things as a child and into my adulthood here in the state has been that there has been adequate protection of areas where, and I think I'm the most conservative person in the world, where there wasn't any access. And I think conserving that value is something that I prize highly, and I ask you to keep at the heart of what you do for public lands in this state. I just spent the Independence Day holiday in the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, where I saw one other person besides my husband who was with me, and that was a Fish and Game officer. There are wolves in there, and last year one of the wolves was shot illegally. It is a salmon fishery, and there are no salmon there. We took fishing gear and we couldn't catch any trout there because the water is so pristine and sterile that the trout haven't moved into there, even though the salmon are gone. We saw a landmark that had a landscape that had been changed by fire, and that's a natural part of the process and needs to be allowed. And we saw a vast, beautiful area of this state. That quiet and that solitude is what renews me so that I can come back to Boise and do good work with the people that need my help here. I strongly ask that you take that kind of access to the heart of what you do with public lands. Thank you.
Next question.
Right over here, Senator Craig.
Okay, we'll go to the back of the room. Thank you.
My name is Mark Mendlove. I'm a Boise resident. First of all, Senator, thanks for the opportunity to be here as a constituent. It's a privilege to have your ear for a moment. My question speaks to recreation, which came up several times from panelists. And Undersecretary Ray, as an avid quiet recreationist, I'd be happy to provide you with charts and graphs that would show equally steep growth curves in sales of backpacks or hiking shoes or snowshoes or backcountry ski gear. Recreation on all fronts, as one of the panelists said, is growing exponentially. I've heard it said, and I believe it's true, that asking motorized and non-motorized users to share the same trails is akin to asking smokers and non-smokers to share the same restaurants and public spaces. the impacts of one group on the other are not equal. And as a quiet recreationist, I don't begrudge my motorized counterparts their chosen form of recreation, but I don't believe that it belongs in all places at all times. So my question is, what is your take on shared use of trails or segregation of use areas?
I think that a good transportation plan, such as those that we're developing for each of the national forests, is probably going to have a mix of both kinds of approaches. There will be, by necessity, some segregated trails, and there may be others where we can find a way, because of the popularity of the area, to share the use, either because the groups involved are prepared to share it, or because they can agree on how they would share it in a way that has them there at different times, as we currently ration use in Hell's Canyon. So I think there's going to be some of both of those.
Rebecca?
Well, I think that one of the things I heard today in the Boise area, where you have shared use, that it is possible. And I guess I have a reaction to what you say and kind of the unstated message of it. And I get back to the idea that what we saw in this Boise Foothills area is how can we find a solution together? I think we have to not make judgments about each other and about our chosen forms of recreation. You know, again, get back to, we're here together. This is, you know, this is your state. You love it. And different strokes for different folks. And how can we share the landscape and work together? And my understanding of the Boise Foothills is they found that solution. And I agree with what Mark said. There's going to be different solutions in different landscapes. But let's put your energy in finding that solution and figuring out how to live together and make it work.
Hello, I'm Michelle Waddell. I've lived in Boise 30 years plus. And I have one comment and another one I thought of as the panelists were speaking. The gentleman had talked about his drive to Boise from Grangeville, spoke of how beautiful that was, and I would definitely agree. That is a beautiful drive in our beautiful state, but I'm also a private pilot, and I've flown that route, and it's not so pretty because all the clear cutting. That's just a side note. My comment is, or Senator Craig has said something about his grandmother, which made me think of a story about my grandmother, who immigrated here from Tahiti when she was 4. And on her way out of Tahiti, when you leave, everyone gives you a shell necklace. And they gave her so many shell necklaces that she could barely walk. She had so many. And she brought them to America. She had so many. She was giving them away, using them. Growing up, she would play with them, make belts out of them. She moved to Montana. She'd use them as lassos. When my father was a child, they would play with them and give them away. There were so many of them. And by the time my father got older, there were only a few left. And they were trying to keep the necklaces nice at that point. And here I am, the second generation. There's like 2 ratty little necklaces left. And boy, do I wish my grandmother had taken a couple of those, put them away, and I could have them right now in their pristine form. And I think we are in a nice position now that we have this pristine land, and we have the opportunity to put it away and keep it for future generations so they can have that, so they can have a quiet place to go. And I think we really need to, I'm really nervous. We really need to take advantage of that opportunity that we have.
Thank you for those comments, yes.
Hi, my name is Chris Cook. I'm an avid mountain biker, and I also am the state representative for the International Mountain Bike Association. And I just recently got back from the Boulder White Clouds. I spent 4 days up there with a number of people, and we just had an absolutely amazing experience on mountain bikes. And we ran into a couple hikers and a couple guys on dirt bikes, and every time we stopped and we had a wonderful conversation, and no one talked about, what are you doing back here? I don't like seeing you back in these woods. And I just don't see the conflict back in the Boulder White Clouds, that when you come here and people talk about how someone on a backpack doesn't want to see someone on a mountain bike, and someone on a mountain bike doesn't want to see a dirt biker. I mean, it's just amazing when you actually get out there and see how well everyone really gets along. And the one thing that really, a lot of the people who I rode with, they were very concerned about the fact that the Boulder White Clouds could possibly be designated as wilderness. And to the north of the Boulder White Clouds, we have the Frank Church Wilderness of No Return. To the east, we have the Sawtooth Wilderness. And the only thing left around Stanley for us mountain bikers is the Boulder White Clouds. And now someone is trying to take that access away from us. And it really troubles me, because today, I don't have children right now, but a number of guys that I ride with, they have children. And they'd like to be able to take their kids on these same trails that we rode over the weekend, over the past 4 days. And so that way they can enjoy them. And everyone, I know we've been talking a lot about compromise and collaborative processes. And I'm only 26 years old. And today, before I came here, I pulled up the 1980 Central Idaho Wilderness Act. And in the Wilderness Act, it says, "End the controversy over which lands within the Central Idaho region will be designated wilderness." And my question to you is, or I actually would like to maybe empower you to put an end to the constant battle over we're going to designate this as wilderness, and then 20 years down the road, someone else comes along and we got to designate, oh, this is wilderness. So that way my children 20 years from now won't have to stand in front of people like you when they would much rather be out, frankly, riding their bike. And so, even I do it.
You just about said enough. No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and giving me the opportunity to speak, and I hope that you or maybe your children get up to the Boulder White Clouds and can enjoy them, whether they be by mountain bike, by hike, or by dirt bike. Thank you.
I think the only thing that I would say is that the one thing I think we could both agree upon is I don't want your children to have to appear before somebody like me either. Unfortunately, in a representative democracy, that will be your children's responsibility, as it is yours. And as our needs, desires for these lands evolve over time, the decisions that we make about them are going to have to change over time as well. So the best thing I think you can do with your children when you have them is impart on them the sense of responsibility of what they need to do as citizens in a representative democracy to be as articulate as you were here tonight.
Right now, we have Senator Mike Crapo working with a diverse group of stakeholders to try to resolve and designate areas in the Canyonlands, primarily of Hawaii County. Mike Simpson is working in the Boulder White Clouds area with a diverse group of people to see if there cannot be resolution there. On 3 different occasions over the last 25 years, I have attempted to resolve the issue you talk about. That's why you're holding in your hand a piece of paper for the 1980 Act that never became law. I know of no other issue that Idahoans are more passionate about than their public lands. And that's why this is such a very difficult issue. To designate by an act of Congress certain utilizations, certain references to the land and how it might be utilized and or protected. There's no doubt about that. I said to a group much like this last night in Idaho Falls, in the mid-'80s I had a pollster working in my behalf in an election, and I asked him to go out and ask a series of environmental questions of the group polled. He came back and said, I had never polled a group like this in my life. Everybody we touched viewed themselves as an environmentalist by some definition. It speaks to the passion about the land and the resources of those lands and the tremendous complication in trying to resolve these issues. We hope to be able to do that in time. And I've withheld judgment on the actions of Senator Crapo or Congressman Simpson to see if they could not work out compromises that I might be able to help facilitate. At the same time, that is a very significant trouble. Or it is a very significant effort that brings about those kinds of passions. Thank you, Will. Next question.
We're going to this side of the room over here, okay?
I don't know how to follow the 26-year-old that was so passionate, but my name is Melissa Wintrow, and I've only been here for 6 years, but I have
Did you take the test?
I passed. I got the secret handshake.
Good, thank you.
And I have a deep reverence for this land. I'm from Ohio, and I remember the first time I saw a bald eagle in Boise, Idaho, when I was running along the Greenbelt. I mean, I'm moved to tears when I think about it. And I recognize this is a passionate issue. And I didn't hear judgment in the man's comment about backpacks. I think we all can reach resolution, but we can't forget our responsibility to this land. And like the woman said, I so respect the 6th generation Idahoan, that once you take it away, once you chop that tree down, you can't put it just right back up right away. And I was traveling through Washington last week, and I was deeply saddened by the miles and miles of clear cut and regrowth, and there's very little old growth left. And I think about the generations to come, you know, that it's very limited. And I'm reminded when I went to Yosemite that that quiet land is a rejuvenation. And there's so much mechanization in our country that it's so noisy that we need separation. And that's not a judgment. I respect people's ATV use, and some of my best friends are hunters. But I think that when you put noisy vehicles with quiet recreationists, it totally changes the experience. And I don't, that's not a value judgment. I don't hate ATVs, and I'm a mountain biker and all those things, but I think that really needs to be considered. And that there are lots of roads up to the wilderness boundaries, but I'm really concerned about the wildlife and the habitat. And if we do things and make decisions that are irreversible, that's the thing that will break my heart about this country.
One of the things I'd like to mention, just in response to that last question, because I'm also a native Ohioan, is that we talk about preserving the land, and as opposed to making irreversible decisions, as if these systems are static and not changing but for the changes that we would impose on them. The fact is that these systems are dynamic. They will change on their own. They have been changing and were changed significantly in pre-Columbian times by very large Native American populations. So one of the things that we, as we supervise our professional land managers and scientists, we seek to better understand is both what are the consequences of action, but as well, what are the consequences of inaction. So as we engage one another in these discussions, I think it's important for us to understand that these systems will change on their own, often not in ways that we would find acceptable or desirable if just simply left to their own devices.
I would just add to that. We are dealing with a dynamic landscape, and I don't think anyone disagrees with the comments that were made this evening by this woman. But that's the issue, is the question of how do we make those choices. The issue that is being confronted by Idahoans is how much wilderness, how much roadless, where, what are the choices that we have to make? We all value silence and retreat. We want that. We need that in our busy world. We all agree with that. But how much and where? That's where the tough part comes in. And that's where we need to understand one another and sit down and try and get inside each other's heads and values with respect and come to tough decisions with the public. And it requires a lot from the public to lead the busy lives that we lead in this 21st century America, to get you people involved in this decision making. That's asking a lot, but we need your involvement. We can't just depend on the professional advocacy groups, the lawyers, the industries that are involved. We need the folks that live here, that love to recreate on the land, that make their living on the land. You need to have your voices heard and be involved. And that happens through the public land management process, in the case of the Bureau of Land Management, and the forest planning process, in the case of the Forest Service. And it takes time, but that's your opportunity to make a difference and to help us make these tough decisions.
My name is Don Boyer. I'm from Garden Valley. I'm a retired firefighter. And did you guys know that Idaho was actually one of the last lands in this hemisphere to be made? Extinct volcanoes. I mean, that's why we have so much bare lava ground. There was a deal on TV not too long ago about Discovery Channel, about they found 3 foot of ash in southeastern Kansas that actually killed animals at a water hole. And it came from an extinct volcano in Idaho. You know, we try to, if you believe in God, God made this. If you don't believe in God, through this system, it's come to this point. There's been catastrophes. There's been the Ice Age. There's been global warming. And I bet you $10 during that big volcanic eruption that happened here, that there was an ozone layer that was really confused. It might not even have been here. But the point I'm trying to make is, this thing that we have is precious to all of us, and each one of us has a different idea how it ought to be taken care of. Take an example of farmer. A farmer is a conservationist. We don't have too many of them anymore. We bought ground up on the foothills so we can't build on it, and we're taking this ground that's worth now $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 an acre, this absolutely great production ground, we're turning it into homes, okay? Because we want to look over there. Now we're getting our food from Chile, and it's kind of confusing. We're having a problem kind of understanding what our role is here. Our role really is to enjoy what we have and not to exclude anybody, because we came to Idaho. If most of us that had gone back where we came from, we wouldn't have urban sprawl. We wouldn't have to worry about density, makes no sense, or whatever, all the signs that come up, because there's a lot of people moving here. And you know why? It's a beautiful state. And you don't have to go very far to snow ski, water ski, sit on a rock, throw a rock, shoot a pistol, or whatever. You talk about clear cutting. We talk about it all the time, but how many of you snow ski? Were you all excited about the tamarack thing? Isn't that a wonderful thing? And if you look, they clear cut the sides of that beautiful West Mountain. You need to have patience with each other. I'm a multiple use guy. I don't do any of it anymore because I enjoy my grandkids. But the point is that we have to get along with each other. If we don't, we're going to cut this thing off to spite our face. We're not going to be able to get anywhere. The Oahe Canyon's a big conversational issue. I was at several of the meetings we had before, and there was people there that wanted no cows, nothing dying, nobody riding a horse, and when they had their special walk along the Oahe Canyon, that they didn't want to run across 10 Boy Scouts doing the same thing. Well, we've got to get past all that. We've got to, okay, but you understand what I'm trying to say. And we talk about taking care of. When you walk along, we have horses pooping on the trail. I've been up in Spangle Lake country. I've seen kids there from Kentucky, and not one of them was carrying a Ziploc bag full of his own stuff that he left. He left in a trail somewhere. My point is, that's okay, because this world is a great place. I mean, we all drove here in a gas-guzzling, smoking, carbon-pushing car, and for what reason? Because It's about, I want to get there, and I can't get there. One more thing I want to say. This is not about me. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about us. We live in a great country. This is a great state. Have a little compassion and be patient with the folks who are trying to enjoy the same thing you're trying to enjoy, but in a different manner.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Warren Hagenward. I'm Vice Chairman for Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife of Idaho. And I've got a comment, and then I've got a question for you. First comment is...
You make the comment if it's 50% less than this.
It's probably a little bit shorter than that. I think one of the things that all of us have been talking about is access, and what areas we're going to have access to, which really concerns me, because such a large portion of our state is state and federally owned, and that belongs to me, and belongs to you, and belongs to you. That's my property, and the BLM and the Forest Service are the stewards of my property. So I think we really should default to access and discuss what should be restricted. If we start talking about what are we going to give access to, then we're starting with the wrong default. That's my property, and I want to go enjoy and recreate on that property. The question that I have is, we started with 35 wolves here in 1995 as an experimental group of wolves. And now we have over 40 packs of wolves. Our approved state plan says we can have up to 15 packs. Under the 10J rule, we can do some management of that, but our hands are really, really tied. And while we're waiting for some decision in Wyoming, these wolves are devastating a number of our deer herds, our elk herds. They're impacting economically the ranchers that we have in the state. And some of the folks are afraid in some counties to have their kids stand out by the road waiting for the school bus. We need to be able to untie our hands to do some wolf management. And I'd like your comments on what are we going to do in the meantime while we're waiting for Wyoming's plan to be approved or delisting the wolf. Is it possible to do anything? Thank you.
The person in charge is not Rebecca, but certainly the Department of Interior and U.S. Fish and Wildlife directly involved in that as we attempt to bring resolution in the tri-state area for the purpose of delisting. Rebecca, would you wish to comment on that?
I'll just comment briefly on this because it isn't my area of expertise, but I know that the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Assistant Secretary Craig Manson is working hard with the 3 states to get the wolf delisted. And the Fish and Wildlife Service has approved the programs of Montana and Idaho for post-listing, because once the wolf is delisted, it's very important how the species is managed after listing. We've had a difference of opinion with Wyoming on how they propose to manage the wolf post-listing based on some legislation that their legislature passed that would treat the species as a predator, and that did not pass muster with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We're continuing negotiations with the state of Wyoming, trying to come to a resolution so all 3 states can delist the wolf at the same time, which makes sense because of the geographic nature of the state. The populations are going back and forth. I lived in Montana. We had wolves living up behind us. We understand about the wolf and the issues and challenges it poses to livestock ranchers and to people. And my understanding is that Fish and Wildlife Service, in the meantime, can work with you, can work with individual ranchers and folks to deal with problem wolves, that your hands are not totally tied. It's not the complete flexibility that you would have once the wolf is delisted, but you can work with Fish and Wildlife Service and your state game and fish agency to handle problem wolves, and obviously you're encouraged to do so. And I think Senator Pritchett might have something.
My only other comment, because I think she's outlined the difficulty we're into right now, is that it is a priority of the delegation in working with the Wyoming delegation and their state government to attempt to bring about resolutions so that we can get a general delisting in the area and get into a management plan that all parties can live with And we would hope that would come sooner rather than later. Thank you. We'll move over here.
Senator Craig, Madam Secretary, Mr. Secretary, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. I'm David Hawk from Boise, Idaho. One of the things that I'd like to say about the potentially roadless areas that have been held under adjudication for over 20 years now is that in that intervening time, the technological advancements in the exploration for oil and gas, for instance, as well as minerals, but particularly oil and gas, have been monumental. In fact, today, as you're well aware, Madam Secretary, where the Jonah field is in Wyoming, near Pinedale, Wyoming, 10 years ago there were no wells there, and today we have two of the largest fields in the United States of natural gas. But I portend to you that even after it's all done, 60 years from now or 50 years from now, we'll be able to reclaim those lands completely, such that in 10 or so years you will never know there was an oil and gas field there. I recently drove by the Showbell field in Oklahoma, one of the largest oil fields in the world. Today, you have no inkling that there was ever a field there. Pretty much dry, pretty much gone. The fields are back, the agriculture's there, the berry bushes are there, the heat is there. It's my old native state. And you still can't tell that that was one of the largest oil fields in the world here 30 years after it became somewhat extinct. So there really is no place in America where we can't drill. And if it's a dry hole within 5 years, reseed, reforest, revegetate, recultivate, you'll never know we were there. If it's a producer, then that'll have to take place after the production has depleted, except on the North Slope of Alaska, where it will take 50 to 100 years, I grant it. And I ask how many people are going to visit there in the next 50 to 100 years. But one of the real issues, you brought up the issue, Secretary Watson. Recently I've had the appreciated opportunity to visit with a number of sensitive issues with a number of federal agencies. We've been with NOAA, NIMS, Fish and Wildlife Service, the BLM. We've been with the Forest Service. We've had Department of Interior, et cetera, et cetera. It's gone on and on and on. And one of the things I said, well, who's responsible for what here? Why is there all this overlap? And someone explained to me that when Congress has passed one piece of legislation after another, the rules and regulations from the previous pieces were never removed. So we're just adding one more layer of confusion on, basically. And the federal agencies and their employees really have a hard time dealing with it, and they have a harder time explaining it, I think, sometimes. Consequently, what is it we can do? I mean, you said going from 200 pages to 20 pages. Boy, I laud that. I really, for an old geologist, I think that's wonderful, frankly. But today, that's only an executive summary for an EA, almost. So what can we do to simplify and remove a lot of the rules and regulations so that if we want to move jointly, we can go from point A to point B and remove the opportunity for lawsuits at every step of the way?
We had a similar question last night, and we seem to come back to this issue, and it's a tough one. We've had about 30 years of environmental lawmaking, beginning in the 60s and late 60s and 70s. We've passed a series of laws, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Resource Conservation Reclamation Act, the Surface Mine Control Act, acts to protect cultural and historic resources, Endangered Species Act, Wildlife Protection Act, Golden Eagle Act, many different acts, and then the Process Act of the Malvern National Environmental Policy Act. And these are substantive acts to protect resources and procedural acts to make us stop, look, and listen as we take actions. And they combine together with our land management acts in many layers of process and do's and don'ts. And they add a lot of cost and time. Time is money. And in some ways it's been good. In a lot of ways it's been good. We could look back to Ohio, Mark's state, where rivers were on fire. That was not acceptable. We had to do something. But now we're in a position where we have a lot of layers and regulations, and it's a lot of things that in some ways are difficult to work your way through. I was working in Montana on a mine project, and we not only had the federal laws, but we also had state laws. And we built a big chart that was about 5 feet by 4 feet, and we put all the various laws and the various processes, and we had Velcro stickers, and we tried to plot out when we had to get things done and in what order, in order we have everything done at the right time so that we have the state NEPA and the federal NEPA, everything done so we have the right permits at the end and have it all finished up. But it was that complicated. And it's difficult, and it's difficult for land managers. And one of the comments that we had earlier today is exactly right on. We just had one of our finest state BLM managers retire at a very early age because of the time of process. He's in the office all the time. He went to work, and many of our managers in the Forest Service and BLM went to work because they love the land. They want to be out working on the resources, working with people that work on the land, and they're not. They're in there pushing paper. And these laws are all well-intentioned, and they've had good effects. But there's been a cumulative effect of law, and it would be wonderful if we could step back and kind of look at them logically and get them focused in and accomplish what we want to do now, 30 or 40 years later. But that's not the way the real world works. They're there. And we've taken some attempts in the Healthy Forest arena to try and get them focused in and become more efficient and effective. I've described some of them, the Model EA and certain other tools, and we're doing this in targeted areas. And that, I think, is what I can offer to you. And then the idea of cooperative conservation, where we try and gain consensus around decision-making so we don't resort to litigation and tie it up in that stream of paperwork. So that's kind of where we're at. It's a system of our own creation, and like many things, good intentions sometimes have unintended consequences.
I think the answer, or the best answer to your question, is found in a portion of the phrase of your question, which was, what can we do together to work our way through this Gordian knot of administrative process? One person's wasteful administrative process is another person's fail-safe protection sometimes. And Rebecca and I have taken on the responsibility to make our agencies more efficient and more effective at what we do, and we are and will continue to work our way through to simplify our administrative processes to get to the point where we can make decisions better, faster, and cheaper. But the fastest way to get to that outcome is by working together with people who don't necessarily share your same point of view of what the outcome should be, to see if you can agree that whatever the outcome, we can certainly design a better process to get there.
One of the things that we have attempted to work on that addresses that issue of conflict, and I think in small parts we've been successful. Obviously, a variety of these acts that Rebecca referred to were importance to change the process and to change what we had been doing because of a concern, and in many instances legitimate, that the environment was in many ways being degraded. What we saw happen out of that, and Rebecca again referred to it in her opening comments, we now see management by courts and by judges who frankly know little or nothing about the resource. And they oftentimes err on one side or the other out of ignorance. And that should not have been allowed, and Congress should not have allowed it. But it takes 50 plus 1 votes, 50% plus 1 vote in either body of the Congress, and in some instances of the Senate, it takes 60 votes. But having said all of that, oftentimes once these laws are in place and interest groups form around them, then those laws become very, very difficult to change. There is a growing level of trust in many respects. I believe the Healthy Forest Act was a compromise that recognized some of those areas of trust. It was no longer acceptable in urban or municipal watersheds simply to let it burn. There had to be something done to cause the health of that watershed to be improved for the purpose of the urban dweller or the municipal watershed. Why? We were able to establish categorical exclusions with EAs and a variety of other approaches. And in many instances, it's now working. And And I liken it to kind of crawling before you can walk again, to develop a common understanding and a trust that these agencies and these land managers really do their very best in most instances, based on where the law is. It is a very difficult process, and I think both Rebecca and Mark are right. It is piled knee-deep now in regulation, that over time, when the public opinion adjusts to it and trust is established, then the public people who react to that public opinion can move to make some of that change. Another question.
My name's Ron Dillon. My wife Rhonda and I have waited almost 2 years to ask a specific question relevant to yourself and Rebecca, BLM and private property and where they come together. In our spare time, we put on special events. We put on 65 BLM permitted motorcycle events since 1979. We've done 107 mountain bike events, cross-country ski events, and even occasional horse race. So we're pretty well versed in the BLM permit process and the Forest Service permit process. I also want to say we've worked with your staff member Mike Freeze here and Lane Bangeter with Senator Crapo's office and found them superb to work with, but we're excited to be able to finally address you. One of our strategies for many, many years has been to utilize both public and private property. As you're aware with the permit process, there's a lot of issues and red tape and expensive steps that have to be taken to recreate with a special use permit on public land. In the past, we've run many, many times from public land onto private property and sometimes back again onto the public land. Never once in 65 BLM permits have we ever had an issue with that. At times we've actually given BLM a blank map saying, we're not showing you this section here because this is on private property. And BLM has always said that's fine as long as you have written landowner permission to do that. We have no problem with that. In 2002, we ran a section, if you go just south of Jackpot, Nevada, it's 17 miles long and 5 miles wide. The historic San Jacinto Ranch, we did that. When we did a similar event in Winnemucca, Nevada in 2003, we ran a substantial amount of private property. Imagine our surprise after the event was over, we got a $2,000 bill from the BLM for their cultural resource clearings and all the things that they do on BLM land. And when we mentioned to them that this bill was relevant to private property, they said, we can go onto private property. We can do cultural clearances on private property. We can do what we want on private property. We've been fighting this issue for almost 2 years now. Robert Abbey, the state BLM director in Nevada, has told us that this has been BLM's policy since 1966. We vehemently disagree with that, and we have the proof that we've written, my wife and I have written a 26-page report. We can show 18 talking points where BLM is violating their own policy and their own procedures. We've put this in your staff's hands, Senator Craig. We would very, very much like to give a copy to Rebecca this evening. Very ominous overtones. One of the BLM folks in Nevada said if you're running a special use permit that has 99 miles of private property and 1 mile of BLM property, we can look at all 99 miles of private property. We can and we will. This is beginning to substantially impact other recreation permits in the state of Nevada. We have an ominous feeling that that may spread up to BLM in Idaho. And so my specific question for you, Rebecca, would be, are we wrong? Has this been the BLM's policy since 1966 to charge permit fees and cultural resource fees relevant to private property?
I'm not aware of this particular issue, but I am aware of the concept that's embodied in it, and it's the issue, the legal issue of the kind of small handle or the small trigger. If you have a small federal handle, so to speak, in what is largely a private enterprise or activity, federal agencies have argued that they can invoke federal environmental laws and processes to analyze that. And that has been the subject of many analyses of how much of a federal presence or handle triggers those kind of reviews. And I would have to take a look at your presentation that you have and look at what the state director said in Nevada and talk to the solicitor's office to see what the situation is, because I'm not aware of it in the recreational context. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
That's an obvious invitation for you to hand to Rebecca that treatise this evening, all right? Please do. Question over here.
Thank you, Senator, for hosting this forum, and thanks to everyone who's here, because I think without all of the input, we're not going to get any further down the road. But there are a lot of us who aren't here, who aren't able to be here, and it might sound kind of hokey, but a lot of people, a lot of entities who can't speak up can't be here, like the wildlife and the wildland that's impacted by our use of those lands. And I can't go any further without responding to your man over here who was commenting about oil and gas drilling. I may be a mama bear, but I'm probably not going to be around in 50 to 100 years, but I know my children will be, and I see a lot of young kids here who will be, and maybe they're going to have interest in going up to the North Slope in Alaska or spending time in central Idaho in the primitive area. And I think that it's unfortunate that some people are so easily dismissive of that value. I was just one other comment. I was recently at a forum where Congressman Simpson was speaking, and I would like to just invoke what he had to say about snowmobiling. And as a snowmobiler myself, I'm a hunter, I'm a fisher, I'm a biker, all of this. I understand what he was saying when he said, what's the first thing a snowmobiler or a mountain biker or motocross rider does when you approach a vista? You come up to the top of the hill and you see this, beautiful landscape. What do? You shut it down. You shut off your machine and you enjoy the landscape and you enjoy what you can see. And I understand that because as a snowmobiler, that's what I do when I come over the summit. And I would submit to all of us, to all of you here, that we need to approach these issues from a base of consideration of our values as human beings, as snowmobilers, as mountain bikers, as backcountry skiers, as mothers, as miners, whoever we are. We need to look at this from our core values, and not so much what my access is going to be or what my access is not going to be, but what are my values? And going forward, we need to take a look at, is there value in maintaining primitive area in this great state of Idaho for our psyche, for the psyche of our children, and for our psyche as Americans? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do one more question, and then we're going to be out of time. So, right here. I apologize, but we've got to get these folks back to their rooms and to bed, because we're going to work them hard tomorrow. Yes.
Senator Craig, Secretary Ray, and Watson, welcome to our great state of Idaho. It's nice to have you here. I'm a resident of Idaho for nearly 60 years now, and joined from North Idaho to Central Idaho to our residents here in Southern Idaho. I represent the Western Whitewater Association, of which my gentleman friend here stated he had a great experience over the 4th of July weekend in the White Clouds. I also had a great experience in Hell's Canyon, traveling from Pittsburgh Landing down to the Salmon River, and then back up to Pittsburgh Landing and on up the Snake River into the heart of Hell's Canyon. In our Whitewater Association, all we ever ask for is fair and equal use for both parties. There were several hundred rafters on the river. We all got along, we all waved. I think it's a training process. We try to train all of our new members of the Western Whitewater Association to be fair and equal and treat everybody with respect and with the rafters as well. I love the comments from the gentleman from Garden Valley. We all have to train ourselves to treat each other with respect and enjoy our country and our state of Idaho. So thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that there are time limits that we have to conform to. Let me thank all of you very much for joining us this evening and participating. And as was mentioned. We have a green card that we're handing out for any who would wish to make additional comments or questions. We'll respond to those questions in your behalf to you, and we'll be more than happy to do so. Would you join with me, though, in thanking Secretary Watson and Secretary Ray for being with us?
We have the proof that we've written, my wife and I have written a 26-page report. We could show 18 talking points where BLM is violating their own policy and their own procedures. We've put this in your staff's hands, Senator Craig. We would very, very much like to give a copy to Rebecca this evening. Very ominous overtones. One of the BLM folks in Nevada said if you're running a special use permit that has 99 miles of private property and 1 mile of BLM property, we can look at all 99 miles of private property. We can and we will. This is beginning to substantially impact other recreation permits in the state of Nevada. We have an ominous feeling that that may spread up to BLM in Idaho. And so my specific question for you, Rebecca, would be, are we wrong? Has this been the BLM's policy since 1966 to charge permit fees and cultural resource fees relevant to private property?
I'm not aware of this particular issue, but I am aware of the concept that's embodied in it, and it's the issue, the legal issue of kind of small handle or the small trigger. If you have a small federal handle, so to speak, in what is largely a private enterprise or activity, federal agencies have argued that they can invoke federal environmental laws and processes to analyze that. And that has been the subject of many analyses of how much of a federal presence or handle triggers those kind of reviews. And I would have to take a look at your presentation that you have and look at what the state director said in Nevada and talk to the solicitor's office to see what the situation is, because I'm not aware of it in the recreational context. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
That's an obvious invitation for you to hand to Rebecca that treatise this evening. All right? Please do. Question over here.
Thank you, Senator, for hosting this forum, and thanks to everyone who's here, because I think without all of the input, we're not going to get any further down the road. But there are a lot of us who aren't here, who aren't able to be here, and it might sound kind of hokey, but a lot of people, a lot of entities who can't speak up can't be here, like the wildlife and the wildland that's impacted by our use of those lands. And I can't go any further without responding to your man over here who was commenting about oil and gas drilling. I may be a mama bear, but I'm probably not going to be around in 50 to 100 years, but I know my children will be. And I see a lot of young kids here who will be, and maybe they're going to have interest in going up to the North Slope in Alaska or spending time in central Idaho in the primitive area. And I think that it's unfortunate that some people are so easily dismissive of that value. I was just one other comment. I was recently at a forum where Congressman Simpson was speaking, and I would like to just invoke what he had to say about snowmobiling. And as a snowmobiler myself, I'm a hunter, I'm a fisher, I'm a biker, all of this. I understand what he was saying when he said, what's the first thing a snowmobiler or a mountain biker or motocross rider does when you approach a vista? You come up to the top of the hill and you see this, beautiful landscape. What do? You shut it down. You shut off your machine and you enjoy the landscape and you enjoy what you can see. And I understand that because as a snowmobiler, that's what I do when I come over the summit. And I would submit to all of us, to all of you here, that we need to approach these issues from a base of consideration of our values as human beings, as snowmobilers, as mountain bikers, as backcountry skiers, as mothers, as miners, whoever we are. We need to look at this from our core values and not so much what my access is going to be or what my access is not going to be. but what are my values? And going forward, we need to take a look at, is there value in maintaining primitive area in this great state of Idaho for our psyche, for the psyche of our children, and for our psyche as Americans? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do one more question, and then we'll be out of time.
Senator Craig, Secretary Ray, and Watson, welcome to our great state of Idaho. It's nice to have you here. I'm a resident of Idaho for nearly 60 years now, and joined from North Idaho to Central Idaho to our residents here in Southern Idaho. I represent the Western Whitewater Association, of which my gentleman friend here stated he had a great experience over the 4th of July weekend in the White Clouds. I also had a great experience in Hell's Canyon, traveling from Pittsburgh Landing down to the Salmon River, and then back up to Pittsburgh Landing and on up the Snake River into the heart of Hell's Canyon. In our Whitewater Association, all we ever ask for is fair and equal use for both parties. There were several hundred rafters on the river. We all got along, we all waved. I think it's a training process. We try to train all of our new members of the Western Whitewater Association to be fair and equal and treat everybody with respect and with the rafters as well. I love the comments from the gentleman from Garden Valley. We all have to train ourselves